All right. Welcome, everybody, back to Warm Weather Fans. It is Brian and Zeke here to talk about Week 10 in the Sun Belt. We know we have this Tuesday night game, or had a Tuesday night game between James Madison and Texas State, but we are recording this on Sunday. We're wearing the same clothes that we wore in the previous episode, so that's proof that we're not just going back and calling our shot. But Zeke, this Tuesday night game's interesting because it's James Madison in San Marcos at night against Texas State. JMU is a 5.5 point favorite as it sits today, only 5.5, even though we have talked about and lamented Texas State's lack of defense. They're not really able to run the ball if it's not with Brad Jackson. So they're going to be one-dimensional, and they're going to come in and face a JMU defense that's really been giving people absolute fits all season, including Louisville, who is now ranked. It took them 50 minutes to kind of break through and make an impact in the ground game. So, I think James Madison handles this one easy. If Alonzo doesn't pull one of his Georgia State-ish performances from earlier this season again, I think they handle business fairly easy.
Yeah, they enter this game as we record it Sunday night as 5.5 point favorites, which might come from the fact that even in losses, Texas State has really every game that Texas State has lost has been relatively close, save for the Arizona State game. I guess that only leaves Arkansas State and Troy and Marshall. And that, so that's a bit of a smaller sample size, but that's a combined margin of defeat of 15 points across those two games. So Texas State is well positioned to not get outscored. That's never going to be the main concern. It's going to be how many points the other team puts up. But yeah, JMU puts belt on them because they're just leagues ahead from a program perspective.
Two quick things before we move off this game, because I know this episode's coming out after this game has already concluded. But let me ask you two things, like in theory. Mm-hmm. Number one, do we think Brad Jackson's a better quarterback than Colton Joseph? No, right?
Mm-mm.
Like definitively no.
Definitively no.
What would stop JMU from literally employing the exact same game plan? Like literally just take the ODU game plan out of the trash, dust it off, hand it back to the players and go, yeah, this is also a team that has a mobile quarterback that can't run the football outside of said mobile quarterback. And their whole offense is predicated around throwing the ball. Just do what we did a couple weeks ago. Just do it again. Mm-hmm. And only worse. Like Old Dominion's defense is honestly better than Texas State's is.
Oh yeah. Again, we're recording this ahead of time, so we'll let you know next week if we were right.
Right. All right. So the game is tonight. Marshall is taking on Coastal. It is in Conway. Marshall is only a 3.5 point favorite. Coastal has had this, I guess, resurgence with this new quarterback that they've found, who started rocky but has gotten better, looked better, what was it, 2 weeks ago at this point. So do you think Marshall plays another close game where it comes down to, the wire, last possession wins type stuff? Like, how do you foresee this game playing out? Because the one thing that we know about Marshall is they can score, but their defense is not good. Outside of forcing turnovers against Old Dominion, their defense has not been good. Coastal is shockingly 3-1 in the Sun Belt this season. So what are your kind of thoughts on this one?
I could see this kind of taking shape similar to last week's Thursday night game, South Alabama, Georgia State, where it's two teams that have some pretty glaring deficiencies, but at the end of the day, end up putting up points. Now, granted, last week that when it was Georgia State versus South Alabama, I think we can chalk that up to two bad defenses that got exploited. I think it might be the case here, but with a higher caliber of offense. Samari Collier, as you mentioned, at Coastal has been really good. Carlos Del Rio Wilson, though, has beat the check down merchant allegations, and they're doing some really, really good things there. I think this game might turn into a shootout. Last guy with the ball wins at the end of the day. That said, Coastal's not off fraud watch yet. There's a real chance they come out and play a stinker. I don't think Marshall has that as great a probability of that. I think this ends up being last possession wins. But there's a real voice in me that says Coastal's going to come out and put 7 up.
Keep in mind, their 2 wins in the last 2 games that they've played have come against an App team who seems to be imploding at the quarterback position. I don't really understand what's going on there. And then UL Monroe, who we've talked about ad nauseum about not being able to score points. They can't really move the football. They cannot throw the football at all, no matter who they kind of throw back there. I think this one's going to be interesting. I think I agree with you. I think it is going to be similar to, Georgia State South Al, where I would say I wouldn't touch a spread in this one, but I'd bet the over. I feel like both of these teams are going to be able to move the ball kind of up and down the field. Samari Collier, I just keep waiting for the 30% completion percentage that he turned in around the ULM game to kind of rear its head again and go, oh, actually, I'm not that efficient of a passer. And if they take away my ability to get outside and run, what's that look like? Like,
Sure.
there are a lot of really mobile, nice quarterbacks in the Sun Belt, whereas Colton Joseph is kind of the Charizard, if you're doing a Pokemon evolution of that, where it's like he can sit in the pocket and throw the ball. Now, he's best, making plays outside of structure. But Collier, we have not seen a team really go, okay, we're going to hem you in running the ball wise, which Marshall did against Colton Joseph. And we're going to force you to sit back there and make reads and go from 1, 2, 3, go through progressions, identify a coverage, throw a ball to a spot. Coastal's receiving weapons aren't exactly the best group of receivers I've ever seen in my entire life. And Old Dominion's receivers were way better than them. So I think I lean Marshall here now that I've talked about it a little bit, but I would say take the over. I feel like there's going to be a ton of points either way.
Sure. And that today sits at 54.5. Is that right?
Yeah. And I mean, think about South Alabama, Georgia State just played. I think it was 69 combined points. They cleared it fairly comfortably. So I think it's going to be closer to that. And we know if Marshall goes up, they're just going to keep pouring it on. Like, they're not a team that is going to go up 2 scores and just try to salt the game away, run the ball. That is not what they did against Old Dominion. They were attacking for 50 minutes of a 60-minute game. I mean, they really kind of only eased up once it was way out of striking range.
Yeah, and they did the same to Middle Tennessee State and Eastern Kentucky earlier in the year, 42-28, 38-7.
So, yeah, that's that one. Only 3 Saturday games this week. Kind of a short slate. You've got 3:30 Old Dominion's taking on UL Monroe. This is in Monroe. Old Dominion is a 14.5 point road favorite. I like them here. Straight, like, give me the points, whatever. UL Monroe cannot put the ball in the end zone. They can't keep up with Old Dominion. I would lean toward taking the under, actually, in this one. You've got an Old Dominion team that has, they got the belt from Marshall. They got beat really bad in the second half by JMU. They struggled to score points against App last Saturday. And then you've got UL Monroe, who is lucky to score 14 points a week. So, and the over-under is 53.5. Unless Old Dominion puts up 49 of those, I just have a hard time imagining like UL Monroe contributing at all.
Yeah. I mean, Colton Joseph, while he's still like the Charizard of that archetype, and even within just like Sunbelt quarterbacks, is kind of still at that pinnacle. He's either 1A, 1B, depending on your stance on it between him and Braxton, and what you're evaluating. So he's 1A or 1B. Teams are starting to really figure out. It's kind of like how we've seen teams adapt to Lamar Jackson in recent years, where it's like he's still that guy. That's not changing, but we're figuring out how to rein him in, figuring out how to minimize the damage, especially what he does on the ground, which is absolutely incredible, Colton Joseph. So I think, jury's still out on whether these are good coaches, if it's good coaching that's figuring this out, or if it is every glaring hole that teams are identifying. So, I think ULM, a defense that's not really been great, 49 against Southern Miss, 37 against a Troy team that's been so-so offensively. So I think this will be really telling about Colton Joseph's future and his play style and how it works the remainder of the season, the remainder of his career.
I think if I'm Old Dominion, I think UL Monroe's, if I recall correctly, because I looked it up this past week, their Achilles heel on defense is really their pass D, and so I think if you're Old Dominion, you can get some of those, you can hit some of those deep shots with those receivers like they like to do. I would just get him in. I would get Colton Joseph in. I'd get a big lead, and I'd just kind of take him out fairly early, just because I'm like, do you accomplish anything? Like, if he gets hurt in a game that is not really going to be close, and they go, while they're chasing, the move from, okay, we have 42, now we want to get to 49 or whatever, and he gets hurt in like a meaningless game, that's going to be devastating for their season. So I think this one's going to be so lopsided. I think they can take a big lead and then just kind of pull him and be like, all right, we'll save him for another day.
Yeah, I mean, we're at this point in the season where they cannot drop anything. So an injury would ultimately, because the destiny's out of their hands. It's up to James Madison to lose not one but two games at this point. Three, I'm sorry, because of the tiebreaker loss. He is precious cargo. If Old Dominion had any run game to speak of outside of Joseph, I would say get your 3-point lead, because at that point ULM's going to start freaking out and say, Colton, hey, start getting the bus ready, man. Go get warm. Go tuck yourself in. We'll meet you back at the hotel.
I would almost, I know Southern did this back in the day when they ran the spread option, whatever you want to call it, attack, where it was triple option concepts, but it was from a shotgun. I would almost say let Colton Joseph play like the majority of the game, but let Quinn Hinnackel maybe take like a drive or two in like non-garbage time, just to kind of take, because again, it doesn't matter. You could go 3 and out on those drives. UL Monroe's not going to score. Like if they go down 14 points, like the game's essentially over. So I like I said, maybe rotate the backup in and get him some run in a game that is probably going to get out of hand pretty early. We got another 3:30 kick here. Louisiana is traveling to Mobile to take on South Alabama. South Alabama is a 5.5-point home favorite, which seems huge to me. Over under is 54.5. I actually like the over in this one as well. Louisiana can't do anything on offense besides deep shots with Lunch Winfield or running the ball with Lunch Winfield, because we talked about on the last episode how poor their offensive line is. South Alabama, maybe they found kind of a rhythm off of the Georgia State game. Now, I don't think that they're going to be knocking off any title contenders to end the season, but it's Louisiana. It's not, you're not playing Southern Miss, you're not playing the Troys of the conference, you're not playing JMU or Old Dominion. It's a 2-6 Louisiana team that seems to be floundering, looking for answers here. So I think this is going to be a ton of points, similar to the Georgia State game. If Georgia State can put up 31, I feel pretty confident Louisiana could probably get to 24, I would say.
Yeah, I concur. I think Louisiana is going to put up points. The question for South Alabama is there going to be? We saw Kentrell Bullock finally. We saw a solid game from Bishop Davenport that we've seen earlier in the year, very early in the year, granted, like week 1, week 2 type stuff. but we know how poor this offense is when those guys aren't moving. And we know how poor. So I kind of like Louisiana straight up. I think these are two pretty bad teams that might just get into a really ugly cat fight. I kind of like Louisiana straight up here.
Okay.
There's just too much inconsistency. I think with at least with lunch, right? There's so many other factors in this game. I think two pretty bad defenses are going to kind of come into play here as well. But it comes down to, in these bad games, who's going to make a play. I know Lance Winfield is going to make a play at some point. He's going to convert a long third down with his legs. He throws for 50, 55%, but he throws long. He's going to complete a long pass at some point. He's going to break loose. Something's going to happen. He's going to make that play.
Yeah.
I'm not certain of that from South Alabama, which makes me like Louisiana here.
Okay. And then the last game, Saturday night, 8:00 on ESPNU. Wow, I can't believe they put this game on ESPNU. I'm surprised this isn't an ESPN Plus joint. Arkansas State is traveling to Troy to take on the Trojans. Troy is a 7.5 point home favorite. Over under is 54.5. I think it's interesting that we learned last Saturday that Troy can still put up points in bunches if Gilcrease doesn't play very well. Because I thought, we saw Jordan Lovett really step up and go over the century mark at 2 touchdowns. Gilcrease probably played his worst game since Memphis, his first, which I think was his first game action after Goose Crowder got hurt. So, yeah, I think Troy keeps rolling here. I don't think Arkansas State doesn't have enough defense, and I know they beat Southern last week, but like Southern really, they were the meme of the guy putting the stick in between the spokes of his bike and tripping himself. That they hurt themselves way more than Arkansas State did defensively. So I think offensively, Troy's going to have enough firepower to make Arkansas State's really poor defense pay, and I don't think they're going to have much trouble doing it either.
Yeah, I thought your point about the offense rolling, proving that they can put up points without Gilcrease putting on what had been some of the best games of his career, granted,
easily,
a 2-year career, but the best games of his career by a fair margin. Whereas with Arkansas State, we've compared week in, week out Arkansas State and Texas State in that they're both high-scoring, very high-ceiling offenses with pretty lackluster defenses to back them up. The difference, I would say, between the two is that with like Brad Jackson running that show in San Marcos, what you get is some level of consistency. 3 weeks ago, Arkansas State scored 15 against a South Alabama team that just conceded 24 to Georgia State, right? The Arkansas State, what we now is actually a kind of feisty Kennesaw State team, but 21 points to Kennesaw State. So whereas Texas State, I can count on them to get into a shootout, Arkansas State, there's like a 50-50 chance they come out and score 21 points. And Troy's proven that that's just simply not enough as of late. They've almost flipped the script from what the John Summerall years were, where you knew Troy was going to allow under 10 points. Who knew how many they were going to score? They could score 10, they could score 21, but you knew the defense was going to do its job. It's starting to turn into the opposite, where we're seeing 31, 35, 48-point games, and it's like, hey, some weeks we're going to allow 14, some weeks we're going to allow 41.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Arkansas State, you just don't have enough answers on the defensive side of the ball to stop. But Troy could either lean on the run, with Lovett or Tay Meadows, or I don't know if Tay Meadows is hurt or whatever, but you could lean on the run and have Gilcrease play like a very, small ball type of game where it's like few completions, keep away from making mistakes. Just basically keep away with the ball. Don't make any dumb throws. Try to push the ball down the field. We just try to kind of take care of business and move out of here. I think too what you said, to your point about Texas State and Brad Jackson and how that relates to Arkansas State. Jalen Raynor has like zero margin for error. Like if he's not if he's not fantastic, they're barely beating the best team in the conference by 1 point
Mhm.
on a island game that everybody has, presumably on TV, which is a tough look. So Troy has shown, that defense is still spotty. Like we don't know what they're going to do on a week to week basis, but I have a better feeling about Troy's defense. That Arkansas State's defense is not good, and there's not
Mhm.
really any way to spin that. So I think the Trojans win this one fairly comfortably. The margin of victory might be inside 7.5, but it won't be one of those where Troy played Texas State and it literally came down to like the last, who
Right.
had the ball last in double overtime. Like this isn't going to be that.
Something I
Troy's going to.
want you to watch for this week, and I'll watch for it as well. But in this game, because we feel pretty confident that Troy's going to be able to pass the ball fairly well. I want us to figure out why Troy is a bit of an exception to the rule, and maybe they're just the exception that proves the rule. But Troy doesn't have that guy receiving wise. They really don't. I'm looking at their numbers right now. Their leading receiver on the team has 23 receptions, but they have 6 guys with at least 15 catches on the year. You have 5 guys with at least 200 receiving yards. No one more than 340. Your 3 receivers jointly lead the team with 3 touchdown receptions. And so obviously it's working for them. 6-2, possibly headed to the conference championship game. We'll find out in a couple weeks when they play Southern Miss. I want to find out. That's kind of my goal for the weekend. I'd like you to join me as we try to figure out why they are different than other teams that you were rightfully critical of. I think that it's typically not a successful formula. So try to figure out what's different about Troy.
I think what's different about them is, pull up their schedule real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give you a minute. Okay. In this 6-game or 5-game winning streak, what's the best team they've beaten?
That's a great point.
I mean, I'm not going to discredit them because there are a lot of teams in the conference who aren't winning the easy games. Like they're struggling with everything. But
that's
it's
really
like,
good point.
let me read these teams off. A 4-point win against Buffalo. You win by 7 against South Alabama, who's now the second worst team in the Sun Belt.
In overtime.
Texas State in overtime, who has easily second worst defense, I'd say, in front of Southern. I mean, Southern can't stop anybody for anything.
They're in the bottom tier. I'm not going to give you second worst, but they're definitely bottom tier.
Sure. UL Monroe, who can't move the football, and Louisiana, who has the worst offensive line blocking wise and the worst receiving weapons per PFF. Those are their wins. And I'm like, again, I'm not taking anything away from them, but they could drop, an 8-4 season in year 2 for Gerard Parker would not be anything to scoff at. But it's like they might beat Arkansas State and Georgia State, and they might drop games at Old Dominion and at Southern Miss, and they're going to be 8-4. But they played probably the softest conference schedule. I mean, they've only got 2 teams with 2 conference teams with winning records on their schedule this year. So
I think, then I guess we'll have to then look how it shakes out at the end of the season, because we look at Old Dominion, a team that we've criticized for inefficacy within their weapons. Like you've got Liberty, we're looking at Virginia Tech, we're looking at App, but then we're also looking at Marshall and James Madison. So I guess this is a question that would be better answered at the end of the year when we have the full body of work, because they play such disparate schedules, and you're getting good teams at bad times or whatever. But
I mean, you play here are your tough conference games, and I know I just read off the schedule. You play the number 1 team in the West and Southern Miss at Southern Miss to end the season, which is I think Southern Miss is still a better football team than Troy is. So I think that's going to be a win for Southern Miss. Then you play who, as it sits today, conference-wise, I'm just looking at the standings. I don't actually think this talent-wise, is 4th in the Sun Belt East in Old Dominion. That's your other hard game. You don't play James Madison. You don't play a Coastal Carolina team that's 3-1 in the conference. You don't play a Marshall team that's 2-1 in the conference and has found a quarterback and an offensive identity and stuff like that. Yeah, this is like the easiest conference schedule of all time. And again, as somebody who their pro team has an incredibly easy schedule this year. I'm not saying like taking anything away. I'm just saying when you add the context, you're like, okay, I can see why they don't necessarily need someone to be an alpha receiver for them.
Sure.
Because they haven't needed it. They're playing a lot of teams that struggle to score at all. So I'm like, yeah, that makes sense that they're able to run the ball, play ball control. On the off game, Kilcrease can throw a bunch of touchdowns for 400 yards against Texas State, but he's not doing that every week,
Mm. Interesting.
Well, that's all I have. I don't know if you had any last thoughts on that game before we sign off today, but Zeke, let everybody know where they can find you on socials.
Yeah, man. You can find me on socials at Zeke Palermo, ZekePalermo. We post about the show there. That's the only reason you need to go there. At Zeke Palermo.
Email the show, warmotherfans@gmail.com. You were like, that's the only reason you need to go to my page.
I'm great at selling myself. That's really one of my strong suits. You should hear me in interviews. I'm excellent.
Yeah. I'm not as bad as the guy you fired. How about that? Follow us on all of our platforms, YouTube, Twitter, whatever, at Warm Weather Fans. You can follow me on Twitter at Watch the Stone. We will be back next week. We will have a former Texas State writer for Underdog Dynasty join us, and we want to pick his brain. We want to figure out what is wrong with this team.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a GJ Kinney mindset problem in San Marcos before? We also wanted to get him on one time before they took off to the Pac-12, and we basically never speak about them again. But this has been a really weird team this year, and we want to find out more before they kind of set sail, and who knows what GJ Kinney and Brad Jackson end up doing in the future. It may not be in San Marcos, but we will be back with that next week on Warm Weather Fans.